Okay, happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome to the Tufts Capstone Project Check-in. I put a couple of things on the agenda, but I imagine that you all will probably have additional things you want to talk about. Just some housekeeping up at the top. We've got the grooming session and a GitLab presentation and a retro scheduled. Um, Gina is working through inviting some more participants for a second round of testing. And then thank you for the little walkthrough video that you made about your Figma prototype. I think that's going to help a lot in kind of directing the sort of feedback that you get from folks. I shared that with Nick Leonard and Nick Brandt in the plan designer channel. And if you want, we can also share it with like the wider UX team. I think the trade-off is just that like you're getting a lot more feedback, which is great, but you're also getting a lot more feedback. So like, just be careful not to get like pulled off track by like feedback that's not really relevant to what you're doing, whatever. And it'll add like a little bit of work on your end just in terms of like replying to people, whatever. So that's your decision, but I can share that with them if you'd like as well. If you Oh, my mic just died. Can you still hear me? Sorry, my microphone plugged into the same.
Yeah, it would be awesome if you could share it with the UX team as well. I think we would like the feedback.
Great. Those are the only things that I put in there. What's up with you all? What's on your mind? What would you like some feedback on or ask us questions about or whatever?
Yeah, so for the past week, we had conducted three usable like concept tests so far, and we started to see like a trend in like the answers about like which feature they preferred more or kind of like which one they think would be more helpful to their workflow. So most of the people said the pin feature, they could see like the pin feature being in use, and they think that the tree diagram is like a lot more like it's a good visual, but it's a lot more complicated to understand, and kind of they would like gravitate to using like the original list feature, so they don't think it would be as much helpful as we think it would be. So we had a talk with Linda as well, and then we like decided that we might like change our like concept plan a little bit for like the remaining participants in the first round. So we have another kind of like wireframe for the pin feature. So both would be the pin feature, but depending on like the location and details about which one they think would be more helpful. So we can show you guys the second pin feature as well, and also the adjusted script for the remaining first round.
How many more interviews do you have in the first round?
We have three more, I think.
Okay, and you saw trends based on how many sessions?
Three.
Oh, okay. Oh, good. I'm glad you got six. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. I can share my screen and then An can walk through it. Or An, do you want to share your screen?
Yeah. So essentially I made two variations of the pin feature. One is the top bar the top section that you have seen in the previous prototype, and the second variation is the pin is going to be on the sidebar. So I will walk through both of them to compare and sort of contrast it. Give me a second. All right, so this is still the pin feature, the original one with the top section. So if there's more the like one or two pins, it will appear at the top, and we can edit or unpin or edit by clicking on this menu, or clicking on this see more will redirect us to the section where the pin was mentioned, and that is the original variation. And the second variation that I made is the pin on the sidebar. So essentially when clicking on this pin, for example, it will direct us to the section where it was mentioned, the same for with the original one. And clicking on this one will allow us to unpin or edit the pin on the sidebar. And this way, people don't have to like scroll to the top in order to unpin or edit the pins. And yeah, this is the second variation.
I have a question for the second variation that you explored. What did you learn from the initial interviews that led you to that direction? Or was it based on the learnings?
Yeah,
Yeah,
oh, go ahead, Moya.
go for it.
So I remember like in the two interviews that I was in, like people would usually go to the pin to when we ask like where will you go to gather context. And I remember one of them go to the sidebar and then scroll down to see the like content inside first, and then they will look through like all the description and the related activity. And yeah, Moya, can you add more to this?
Yes. We had like a question in our script about like where do you think this feature should be, or where like do you think it would be? And some people said like at the top, but also some people said that if it's at the top, it like kind of pushes the description down instead of like having the description as like the most important thing. So that if there's a lot of important information, like nothing is really important. So we thought that like if we moved it to the sidebar where like people look first as well, then that would maybe be like another alternative to having the pins on the side.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then a follow-up question, when in the beginning you were saying that you saw trends that people thought that the pin feature would be helpful for them. Did they expand on why and at like what points in their workflows it becomes helpful?
Yeah, so in the interview I was in, they were saying that like the more challenging part is like actually finding the most updated like discussion thread that's most relevant to them. And so currently, like they do sometimes link it in the description, but like everyone links it in a different way. And then sometimes because it's like not as visually called out, they miss it until like they read the whole discussion and they're like, oh, it's like linked up here. And I guess compared to the linked items, they felt like, well, it was like a good visual way to see how items are related. Like they can currently do that by navigating into like epics, and then there's like a tree there. So like there's still like an easier way. Like there is an existing way to do that versus the pin feature. There's currently really no way um of like seeing the most updated
Right.
discussion.
Okay. And then, sorry, I'm asking so many questions, but it will help me provide better feedback. And my other question from the first three interviews would be the specific data that you show in the pinned. I guess in each pin, it's different than what I'm seeing in your second variation. Like I saw more data shown in the first pin than just the title of the pin, for example. Did they have any feedback on what would be more helpful?
Yeah, so I think two people suggested that instead of like, because currently we have the verbatim of like what's highlighted in the comments, and you pin that. Um, Two people suggested that a summary would be more helpful. Um, and then some also suggested maybe like an AI summary that they can edit. So that was some other suggestions about like the content of what's being pinned.
Okay. Okay, that helps. All right, I've asked enough questions, so Sanjung, you have the next point.
Just a minor question about the second version. I like your exploration where this heading to, but in case if the title gets longer, like, do you already have some thoughts? Like, how do you want to visualize this? Is the height like just gets bigger or just
Yeah,
truncates?
I also thought about that when I designed yesterday. So I learned from like the Notion page, like when they have the title longer, um they will sort of like hide it under behind the like three dots. So I think like when I have like two ideas. Like first I would just like keep the title like in full length and then like have it in two lines. So um or the second like idea is just like hide the full title behind the three dots, and then when user click on it, they can see the expanded version of that title.
Yeah, I think like you can definitely explore with like more ideas when you have time. But
Yeah,
yeah, just a thought. Thanks
yeah,
for answering.
that's a good idea. I also thought about that.
For sort of analogous patterns, you might want to look at the way that we do links to mentioned issues or merge requests or users in our rendered markdown. Because when you hover over one of those, you get kind of a popover with some more contextual information. That could be an opportunity if you're going to truncate something to give the user some access to it without, because I think that the primary action on click here is to scroll down to the thing, right? So you wouldn't want to make it so the user has to click twice to scroll down to it.
What do you mean by clicking twice?
Oh, you just said that if it's truncated, then maybe the user would click to see the full thing. So that would mean that clicking on it wouldn't be what scrolls it down, right?
Oh,
Or maybe I misunderstood what you meant.
yeah. Yeah, I see.
I had one very minor feedback thing, but just around the color red. We pretty much only use that for destructive or dangerous actions in GitLab, like things that you can't recover, like data will be destroyed. Um, so I would think about a different color scheme for the pins. And then also more typically we put the three dot action menu, more actions menu kind of thing at the right. Um, so I would just look at other ways that we do that and see, like, you'll get feedback from other designers on this as well. But that was just it's very minor, but it's something that stood out to me.
Yeah, on the topic of that, like something I'm also wondering is like how flexible can we go with like adhering to the design system? Like can we make our own components or
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think what's important is that your design is usable and achieves the goals that you're looking for, right? And if that means that there are things you need that don't exist already in our design system, then there's absolutely no problem with having design that proposes some sort of new pattern. I think what's important about that is just being aware that you're proposing a new pattern that maybe isn't used elsewhere in the app, kind of having some contextual awareness of like, this is a new way for this sort of thing to work. Often if I find I want to do something that doesn't seem like it exists anywhere, I'll ask folks, be like, hey, do we have a pattern for this kind of thing somewhere? Um, if you were doing this work like for real within a team, that's probably the path you would follow. But like, yeah, if you find that there's like no pattern that you find in our like pajamas documentation for something that you think will be the best way to express it, then totally put it in there and call out that like this is a pattern that would be new, whatever. I think this is probably something that would come up as well in the grooming conversation.
yeah, that sounds good. And also, do you want me to like also record this like walkthrough of the variation of new variation and then send a video for the team to get feedback on too?
Cool.
Okay, sounds good.
I'm also curious because we have this concept of pins for the navigation today where you can pin specific nav items to your navigation, so that would move, like if you visit issues often, for example, you could pin that. when you were talking to users, did they know what a pin was in context of the issue, and like did they define it for you?
I feel like the way we set up the test, we're like you're trying to find the most updated context for your issue. So I feel like everyone like saw the pins and like, oh, that must be it.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was just wondering if they like understood that pins were what you're saying, the most updated like description of the issue, but it sounds like that was successful.
Yeah. Or do you think there's like we should not mention like not lead them on in this setup because it is like we do do you know what I mean?
Um, I think I think it's okay. So typically in these types of scenarios, we'll actually work with technical writers on our team and have them kind of review the UI text that we're using. So in this case, like I said, we have pinned items for navigation. Maybe we would use similar terms for the issue, but it totally depends on how the users would react to it. I don't think that you were leading in that question. I think the fact that they associated pinned items with like the most recent updates tells you enough.
I do.
But yeah, just for your awareness, yeah, we would work with technical writing. Go ahead, Chad.
I, I think the only way you might have been like leading is just that like if these are users who are familiar with our UI and there's a new thing there, that's going to draw their eye, you know. But like that's not like I don't think that's like a bad practice on your part, you know what I mean? Like you gave them a task and then they noticed the thing in the UI. I think that if you had more time, you know, if you could test this with someone who's naive to our UI, who's like never used GitLab and see what they think, then like, you know, because they've got a slightly different use case. They're not just I want to find out what's going on with this issue as fast as possible. They're like, what is this? On you know what I mean? There's like a greater level of like needing to onboard for that kind of user, which is not necessarily the use case that you're working on right now. So I think that like any user who's familiar with our UI, if they see this new thing, they're gonna go, "Oh, new thing,"
Yeah.
and that's not like you know like bad testing practice or anything on your part.
Gotcha. I also had another question. Our team was discussing on Monday, and they're like not directly related to the pin features, but ideas we had after the interviews. And one of them was like having the number of comments in like the like saying the number of comments um in the discussion thread. And then another was like automatically adding um, items that were linked in the discussion in the like linked item list. And I guess I was kind of wondering, like, should we incorporate those or should we just like focus on the one main feature of pinning?
I would try not to spend too much of your time on like going wider with other things at this point, but I do think that these are all things that are good to like write down in kind of like a other things we would love to explore if we had more time kind of section.
Okay, sounds
But
good.
they're not bad ideas. They're just like, you know, you're gonna run out of time if you go down those rabbit holes.
I also have a quick question about so what are your thoughts about us like incorporating like AI into kind of like our solution? Because I think a couple like users mentioned about like if they pin like if they see a pin they would want like a short summary or like AI summary of like the whole discussion, or some people even mentioned that like they wanted to have like a short summary, like 3-line summary of the issue, like the whole issue on the side. Like maybe like is that a possible solution, or maybe like what do you guys think?
It could be, you know, I think a semi-open question about this design is like how much use would like how much would people use the pinning? You know, you're investigating specifically if the pins exist, is it useful? But an open question is like how does that content get created? Is it maybe like a like AI suggests like this comment seems relevant or is like has recently been active or whatever, you know, like I think there's an opportunity there maybe on the like in like the input side. Um, but yeah, if you want to explore like something around like, you know, having Duo summarize, you know, one comment or one comment thread sort of thing, I think that seems relevant to this.
Yeah, I think it's a cool idea, but just thinking about like making this summary more accurate would be quite challenging just from the technical perspective. But like if I were you, maybe like I've not spent too much time, but maybe for the future iteration, you can expand and scale this idea, something like this as a prototype, but not that much. Like, do we already have this feature, like summary of the issue description? I know that we have this
Yeah.
in the MR.
So if you use the summarize Duo command, it will
Um,
summarize like the description and then also it'll do a summary of the comments. Um, I don't know that it necessarily like I think that I've never actually tried this. But I think that if you ask Duo, like, I'm totally new to this issue, can you tell me what's going on with it? Like, what are the outstanding conversations about this? What needs to be resolved or whatever? I think that it has access to the information to do that.
yeah, so I think it's probably doable. But yeah, just the future, just put it to the future. Like I don't think it should be part of the NBC anyway.
Mm, okay.
Gina, do you want to verbalize your question?
Yeah, I'll do it. From the interviews that you've had so far, this is a little bit off topic. Was there anything unexpected that you learned?
Yeah, for me, it's like a little bit technical, but I used to think that like the linked items were from the links in the comments, but actually they said that like each time like a person comments like a new issue, like it's not updated automatically into the linked items. So like what they find more difficult is kind of finding those issues in the comments instead of like navigating between the links. So I think that's why our tree feature wasn't like um as good because it reflects the links in the linked items, but not the links that are in the comments. So yeah.
Hmm.
Chad, is that something that the plan team is already aware of? That
I'm
issue?
not sure actually, because this does work slightly differently for merge requests. If you
Mm.
mention an issue in the description of or in a comment on a merge request, then the merge request and that issue do become linked automatically.
Yeah.
Um, that's a good follow-up to ask them about.
Yeah.
Related to that, like how the merges are automatically updated once you mention them. Someone did say that it's like, yeah, it's like hard to tell if it's like actually like the merge is for that issue versus like someone just mentioned it in the like, oh, it's like similar to this issue. And it like made that connection. So like differentiating between like actually directly related merges versus tangentially related.
Yeah.
Totally. I feel like you see that a lot, um, especially if someone accidentally like mentions the wrong issue or something, then just like those things are just linked.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, or something you see a lot internally at GitLab is like if someone's working on like, you know, like a promotion document or something and they like gave you really good feedback on your MR, then they'll like link that MR in the issue that they're using to track their like skills and stuff. And now all of a sudden that MR is related to that issue that's in like a totally different project that's about their like career goals. And yeah.
Definitely that. And you can't unlink them versus issues you can, remove the link once you do it. And I also noticed a workaround for us, and I think a lot of other companies, is in the MR description, we'll say fixes and then link the actual issue that it relates to, which you can tell if you only look at the MR description, but if you go back to that issue, like you said, there could be a bunch of MRs that are linked, so you don't get that same one-to-one relationship.
Yeah, we do actually subtly, not exactly secretly, but it's not very discoverable, do have a couple of different relationships that an issue and an MR can have to each other. But it depends on project settings. So in some projects, if you say closes #123, then when that merge request is merged, it will actually close issue 123. But that depends on your project settings. I'm not sure if fixes is a synonym for that. I think it might be. But there's nowhere in the UI that you can like use a menu to like change that relationship between those two items.
Yeah, another finding that I found surprising was I think at least one person mentioned that they expected the signee to do the pinning and unpinning. Because I know initially we were thinking of maybe um, someone else is like pinning this for whoever's onboarding onto this new issue. Um, but they're saying usually the signee is the one with like the most updated uh, context.
You mean like the previous assignee or like the new person who just got assigned this? Or maybe they
They're
weren't.
saying the new person that just got assigned this.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, did you find any other insights around who would actually be pinning the information? Did they say what they expected, like if anybody could pin it? I know that one would said the assignee, but
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but all three people said that it's like anyone would be able to pin and unpin. Um, yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. Nobody had mentioned the specific like project managers, which was surprising.
Hmm. And did they have expectations around who can see which pins?
There weren't any mentions on that. I can't remember if we had explicitly told them that that the pins would be seen by everyone, but yeah, there weren't any like differentiations that they made.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one person said that like he would pin it so that his friends can see or like his coworkers can see like what's important and like vice versa. So I think like from that person, I think he assumes that like it's public.
Okay. Yeah. Nice. Sounds like you've gotten some good insights. And just so I can be aware when I'm inviting additional users for the next round, were you able to, were all the participants you've met with interested in going to the next round too? Okay. Okay. That helps me when I'm, depending on the number that you need, I'll recruit the correct amount.
Uh, on the topic of moderated user testing sessions, Delia, I think last week you mentioned that you were interested in getting some feedback specifically on moderation. Um, I was out of the office almost the entire time since the last time that we met, so I haven't had a chance to do that yet. But I realized this morning it wasn't written down in our notes from last week, so that's an outstanding item that we owe you.
Oh, thank you.
And actually, now that you bring it up, could I also be added to that list? I would also appreciate some feedback as well.
Yeah, and if there are any particular ones that you like, either think you did really well or think that you struggled in, but point those ones out. We can prioritize that. Otherwise, we'll just kind of go look and find one and watch it, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, anything else? We have basically just 3 more weekly check-ins. Which is scary slash exciting. So but like anything else to check in about today while we're here together, or
I guess I don't know if this is too early. I guess not because we're starting to write our second round of scripts next week. Like, um, yeah, like what are your thoughts in terms of what types of data we should be collecting, um, in like the structure? But I know it's like also really early because we're not done with first round yet.
do you mean in terms of uh like ways to measure usability?
Yeah, that, and also I know originally we were thinking of comparing one of our designs to like how it is originally in GitLab, doing that comparison. Um, yeah, just like thoughts about like general setup about usability testing. And yeah.
I mean, I think you're kind of already doing it, right? You're testing the usability of your prototype now as you talk to people. So I don't know that it's necessarily like a different mode or anything that you're shifting into, right? You're just kind of iteratively working on it. In terms of things you measure, I think always try to bear in mind like the original problem that you're working on, right? And try to measure if you're solving like the problem that you started with, or if like if you've realized that like the real problem to solve is something else over the course of that's fine. But like make sure that you're measuring whether or not you're solving like the big problem that you're working on. Um, and I think that, trying to avoid relying too much on like a Likert scale, like a 1 to 5 kind of thing is probably good because like people are nice. They want to be nice to you. Like they'll give it a 5 because they think it'll help you and like they didn't have a terrible time when they were doing the testing session, that kind of thing. And I think the more specific you can be in your questions, the more objective or impartial people will be. And especially if it's something you can measure where you don't even have to ask them, where you can just observe and see what it was, that also helps. Um, so, measuring things like speed of activity completion are really tricky with a small sample size. If you had like 100 participants, I think you could actually get a pretty good average on it. But with like 6, and there's like a lot of, complicating variables. I think number of steps is maybe a little bit more objective because like, whatever, right? It might take someone 2 steps, but it takes them 10 minutes as opposed to like 10 steps and it takes them 1 minute kind of thing. But like number of steps is maybe a good heuristic for like overall how much mental load it takes to do something. And that's something you can measure just by like watching them do it. Um, I do think that if you ask Likert scale questions like would this help you do your work faster or whatever, do definitely follow each of those up with a why, because they're going to tell you the interesting stuff that's not necessarily like it's not hard data, but they're going to tell you the interesting stuff in the why.
And in the similar scenario, I would normally like to count the number of errors they're making like throughout the usability session, but you can consider that, but I, like as Chad mentioned, I would just focus more on the why side because like the flow itself is not that long. So like it's better to just focus on qualitative insights you get from the sessions, but I think you're doing already a great job.
And I think that also, at least for me, watching back some of your recent sessions, I may have more suggestions for this as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. And then I was thinking if you learned anything from your first round that you thought would be good to follow up or like dig deeper on in your second round, that could always be added as a question. But to Chad's point, just make sure that everything still is focused on the actual problem that you're trying to solve. Yeah.
Do you think we should have like like a quantitative like aspect to it? So like I don't think like a sus score, but like kind of that type of data, or do you think just normal like qualitative would be fine?
I think definitely some quantitative data helps. That's where like looking at like the number of steps it takes, the number of errors that they make along the way, anything where you can get a number that's not just like them thinking up a number and giving it to you, is probably good. Um, Ideally, it would be nice to have a baseline for this, based on like the current experience, because like that delta between like today and with our thing is what you want to see. Um, but I think like you're limited on time for this. If you wanted to, like you could maybe like go into that project that we made in GitLab for this project and like make an issue and like populate it with comments and stuff to kind of like create this situation, and then you could like link people to that, and then you don't have like you're making the prototype just by like interacting with an issue. It may be less work than making a prototype in Figma. I don't know. Um, but you could use that maybe to kind of get a baseline from people.
So
Yeah.
for like the second round, would you recommend doing like original so you get it like a baseline and like our comparison, or would you recommend like having two versions of our design and then doing like A/B testing?
Hmm.
One way you could solve that would be, do you feel like through the first round of testing, you got enough insights to validate that the pin feature solves this problem? Because if you feel confident in that, I think that gives you indication you could do the A/B testing. If you still have questions, then comparing current to new would be better.
And I do think that one, it's not exactly saying, this was a 2 and now it's a 4, but you basically got the users trying to achieve this with the current version through your initial conversations with people, right? People were basically describing how they're trying to do this today and the kinds of problems that they run into. So something you could also try to do is look for quantitative data about the parts of what you're doing that are creating shortcuts in the process people do today, So you can't necessarily say like today it takes someone 10 steps to do this, now it takes 3, but you could say like, you know, many research participants said that this part is tough and like now it can be done in like, these 2 steps or something like that.
Yeah.
So like you can kind of look for like the sort of like before state of some of that quantitative data in your initial conversations when you were doing kind of like problem validation. Anything else? Okay. Well, you know where to find us, and we will give you some feedback on moderation. Oh, and let me know if you would like us to share your Figma prototype with the wider UX co-working channel. So you'll probably get more feedback, which is like kind of a double-edged sword. But there could be like really interesting stuff in that feedback. And anything that's like not so relevant could still be part of the like if we had more time kind of section of your final report, you know.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely like that.
Yeah, that would be great. I also sent the video of the second variation later today.
Cool. So should I wait then and share kind of both variations there, or would you prefer one or the other?
I think I can I think you can wait until I send the second one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Then I think that's a check-in. Thanks everybody. Have a good Wednesday morning or afternoon or evening.
Thank you.
You.
Yeah.
Bye.